I call this Berkshire Regional Planning Commission meeting to order Thursday, November 18th, 2021. This will be a virtual meeting as allowed by Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. General Laws, Chapter 30, Section 20. And this meeting is being recorded. Next is the roll call. Our clerk Sheila will call off the names.
I will be happy to. When I call the name of your town or your city, would you please just tell me your name as a representative?
Recording
Adams,
in progress.
Duval,
thank you. Alford, Beckett, Cheshire,
Traub,
thank you. Clarksburg, Dalton,
Joe Diver,
who was that? I'm sorry.
it's Joe Diver, Dalton Select Board Chair.
Thank you. Egremont, Florida, Great Barrington, Hancock, Hinsdale, Lanesboro,
Barb Davis Hassan,
thank you. Lee,
Donovan, delegate.
thank you. Lennox, Monterey, Mount Washington,
Lovejoy, alternate.
thank you. New Ashford, New Marlboro, North Adams,
Inland, delegate.
Otis, Peru, Pittsfield, Irvin, Richmond,
Fred Schubert here.
thank you. Sandusfield, Savoy,
Sarah Satterthwaite,
Sheffield, Stockbridge,
Christine Rasmussen, alternate.
thank you. Tyringham,
Sarah
Washington?
Hudson, alternate. She's muted.
Thank you. Washington,
Don Gagnon, delegate.
thank you. West Stockbridge, Williamstown,
Bolton, alternate.
thank you. And Windsor, all right, that's everybody.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Did we miss anyone? Okay,
Kent Liu from Washington is here as a guest, Select Board Chair.
okay, great. All right, next we have approval of minutes of the September 30th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion?
Move to accept the minutes, Sheila.
Do we have a second?
Second,
This is a roll call vote. Kate, I believe Kate's going to be taking the roll.
Yes. The motion was made by Sheila and the second was by Roger Bolton. Correct?
I believe so. Huh? I made the motion, I know.
Okay. So I'm going to call out your last name. Duval,
Yes.
Traub,
Yes.
Diver,
Abstain.
Davis Hassan,
Yes.
Donovan,
Abstain.
Lovejoy,
Yes.
Hanlon,
Yes.
Irvin,
Yes.
Schubert,
Abstain.
Satterwhite,
Abstain.
Rasmussen,
Yes.
Hudson, Sarah, Gagnon,
Yes.
Bolton.
Yes.
Thanks.
You all set?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Kate. Next are comments from the public. Is anyone from the public who would like to address the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission with any questions? All right. Okay, hearing none. Next is delegate and alternate issues. Any delegate or alternate would like to bring up an issue that is not on this evening's agenda for discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Next is executive committee actions. And in your packet, there's a memorandum from Tom for 2 meetings that the executive committee conducted. The first one, which was on October 7th, 2021, there were no actions.
Thank you.
There were two there that there was the minutes and we approved the expenditures report, but I believe there's nothing we need to vote on there. For the meeting on November 4th, 2021, the executive committee did approve a few items, and I'll just name them off and then we can vote on them. The approval to enter into a contract with Housatonic Valley Association for Churchill Brook Culvert Replacement Outreach Services. And when I'm done reading these, if anyone has any questions, Tom or myself or anyone from the executive committee can respond. The second one was an approval to enter into a contract with Housatonic Valley Association for municipal culvert replacement cooperative project supports. The third one out of 5 was approval to submit a grant application to the Citizens Housing and Planning Association. Approval to submit grant application to U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for brownfields assessment funding. And the last item that the executive committee approved during that meeting was the approval to dispose of surplus property. Okay, so can we have a motion to approve in a second, then we can have discussion if needed?
John, we don't need a motion on this.
Oh, we don't, okay.
This is just presented for information.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So we're good there. Are there any questions then in regards to the actions that the executive committee has taken at that October 7th meeting? All right. Okay, next, Tom, we want to take this one, the Massachusetts American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding.
Yes, I had hoped that we would have a big spending bill that we could discuss in great detail. But if you've seen the paper or heard the news, I think we have a little bit of more time to wait before we get to spend billions of dollars statewide. I've asked Representative Paul Mark if he would speak to the bill, and really this came out of a discussion we had at the executive committee meeting, is that there are going to be a lot of funds flowing from Massachusetts through the federal government, and there are a lot of different ideas about how it should be spent. And I thought it would be good to get some firsthand knowledge about the process that has transpired so far, but then also the process going forward. And maybe what I'd like to do is see if there's something that communities can do to position themselves to access these funds. So I'll turn it over to Representative Mark. I want to thank you for making the time to speak with us tonight. But you're kind of off of your session now, right? So you have a lot of free time, right?
Yeah, nothing but free time now, especially me out of the delegation. Absolutely, just sitting around. So thank you, Tom, for having me here. This was a really great idea, and when we emailed, I was like, that is perfect timing because I know everything that's in that bill. And then around 6:30 last night, when we were told we were on a recess till 6:15, we came back into session, and the session very abruptly and unexpectedly ended. And so for those of you that don't know the legislative process and the legislative rules in Massachusetts, under the state constitution, the House and Senate must meet every 72 hours year round. But But that being said, we have a differentiation between what we call a formal session, which is where there are roll call votes and a quorum must be present, and an informal session. In Congress, they call it pro forma, where we can conduct business as long as no one member of the House or Senate objects. So any one member of the House or Senate from now until January can object to any action we try to take. So we pass a lot of local stuff. We pass a lot of non-controversial stuff. The formal sessions in a normal year, even under our emergency rules this year, ended last night at midnight. But unfortunately, they actually ended up ending at 6:30 last night. So until January, we can't have a recorded roll call vote. But we can still finalize this and get this to the governor. So just as a preface, before we kind of talk about how we got here and where we are and what needs to happen, there's not a need to worry. If there is an agreement reached Monday, we can pass it and send it to the governor on Monday. So it can happen. And if it doesn't happen until January, then we'll cross that bridge if we get there. But as kind of a recap, I'm sure many of you know this. Obviously, the federal government passed the ARPA bill last year. And as a consequence of that, $3.4 billion went directly to the cities and towns. And so in Massachusetts, so they're already receiving that cash. They're having, in many cases, either public forums to kind of find out what the people of the community are interested in, or they're having their own little process about how they're going to spend it and what they can spend it on and that kind of thing. And there's obviously still a lot of questions, even at that level, as well as while we wait for the state action. On the state side, we received about $5.3 billion in June for the state government to handle. And under the way we spend money as a state, the governor proposed a bill initially to accept that funding and to spend a portion of it. And the legislature wanted to also have an opportunity for there to be public hearings, for there to be comment for each of the 160 representatives and 40 senators to kind of add their stamp to that kind of thing. So initially the governor had proposed, he wanted to have 2.8 billion of it.
You should get on. I see one of your problems. You got like.
Is there a way to mute people that aren't muted?
I just did.
Okay, thank you. And Al, I love you. But so anyway, the governor originally proposed to spend 2.8 million immediately and put it into executive branch agencies and have authority over that. And he wanted to bank 2.5 billion of that, whereas the legislature, and this is what ultimately became law, chose to take 4.89 billion of the 5.3 and bank that and put it in what we've called the COVID relief fund. And so then we had hearings, we had opportunity again for the public to weigh in, for the mayors and the town managers and all these different people to offer their comments to us. And we heard a lot for months, and we decided that this was going to be done kind of like how we do the budget process, but we do it now in the fall season, right now that we've just been living through. And so the bill came before us. And at the same time, in addition to having this funding, there's also a surplus in the rainy day fund from revenue that came in way better than we expected. And as we sit here talking about this tonight, if you told me in February of 2020 that we'd have this problem, I would have thought, no way. And if you told us in April of 2020, after the shutdown happened and the state of emergency was declared, that we'd be looking to spend billions of dollars that we didn't expect to have, I would have thought that was wacky talk as well. So the fact that we're here is amazing and is actually a testament to many levels of government pulling together and coming together at the right moment, ultimately to try to do something to help all of us get through this crisis. And so we, as a House, we voted for a package in October that totaled about $3.82 billion. And that included a $1 billion draw from our stabilization account, the rainy day fund. And then on the Senate side, earlier this month, they did the same thing. And they voted for $3.82 billion, right around the same price tag. So as far as the two price tags, we're in the same ballpark. And where there's agreement is $78 million for federal for food infrastructure grants, $500 million for bonus pay for workers that had to work through COVID, $500 million to replenish the unemployment insurance trust fund, $600 million for public housing, $265 million for education, including $100 million for HVAC upgrades, $720 million for healthcare, and that includes community hospitals, public health boards, nursing homes, things of that nature, $125 million for cultural council grants, $350 for environmental grants for infrastructure, and then in some differences, the Senate looked for $100 million more than the House, going up to $250.9 in public health. They looked for $100 million more when it came to water and sewer, coming in around $175 million. They went up $150 million more than the House when it came to mental health, for a total of around $400 million. And then the House put in $40 million for youth jobs, $75 million for public higher ed capital improvement projects, and $20 million for special ed that the Senate didn't take at all. In terms of earmarks, House members and senators all put in their local amendments. We got a lot of good stuff for Berkshire's in both the House and Senate versions. Where we don't have the final conference committee version, I'm not going to talk about it until we know, which I said hopefully will be in coming weeks. Now, part of what also happened in the lead up to this, so we have until 2024, the end of 2024, to commit this funding, and we have until the end of 2026 to have it actually be spent and still be in compliance with the guidelines of the ARPA bill, ARPA law from the federal government. So that being said, as we've been undertaking this, we've all been watching Washington as well to see what was going to happen with this infrastructure bill. And we've been hearing ranges on that from 1.2, which I think was the final number, 1.2 trillion, to over $3 trillion. And we've been told by committee leadership and by House and Senate leadership, get ready, that infrastructure money is going to be the once in a generational opportunities to undertake really big projects. And so a fear I have as I'm considering why the delay is the president signed that bill on Monday. And so we'll put this in the best light possible. The legislature might be anticipating funding from that needs to be redirected and might be looking for a way to trim out some of the infrastructure stuff that's in the bill that we're trying to pass right now. I know it's frustrating. I was particularly frustrated because me and Senator Hines have been trying to pass a bill for an easement in the towns of Savoy, Monroe, Florida, and Hawley to help them get broadband. And because the session abruptly shut down, it didn't pass. Now, we were able to get a special emergency project permit from DCR, but it was just something that happened so suddenly that, wow. So I was physically in the chamber. We don't have to physically go into the chamber. We're allowed to call in. But I was down there personally to try to make sure that bill got passed. And like I said, the abruptness with which session ended indicates to me that there's some significant disagreement. And again, when I try to put it in the most favorable light, I'm hoping that it's just a thoughtfulness that reflects that let's see what we're going to get in the coming weeks from Washington and see where we can most efficiently and most effectively spend some of that funding. And so we sit here today. Again, it's possible to get a final product to the governor over this informal session period for the next 6 weeks. And if not, it's definitely possible to get it to him in January. But in general, we're in a good position, but I know there's a lot of questions, and unfortunately, a lot of those questions aren't going to be able to be answered as I had hoped when I came on tonight. Want to talk about redistricting?
Jim, go ahead.
Hi, Paul. The transportation for small communities, Chapter 90 type money for roads and bridges for us small folks that don't have to spend $1 billion on a interchange in Alston seems to be notably lacking here. And I am concerned that, that every time we listen to, infrastructure funding, they're saying, oh, we're going to have an opportunity to do all these big projects. Well, we got a lot of little projects that really need to be funded. We've got roads and culverts and bridges that all need to be fixed. And I'm not hearing any of that in the conversation in the legislature. Tell me why.
I've got actually really good news for you.
Good.
The person who filed a $50 million adder to the Chapter 90 bill is talking to you right now.
Well, no, I know you're a true believer, Mark, Paul, but I'm not seeing the love from the rest of the legislature.
So what I was told, so Mass Municipal Association asked me to file that for
Sure.
And I did, and what we were told was this is something that should wait for the infrastructure bill.
Right, but the thing is that even if you got $50 million for the town of Mount Washington, that means $35,000.
Sure.
Okay, at the usual Chapter 90 funding level, and for $35,000, we can't do a whole lot. And this is my soapbox. I'm taking advantage of it. But
as the only legislator from a town of less than 1,000 people, I hear you.
Yeah. So what can we do? How can we try to get some movement on this? I mean, our policy committee in the MMA has been, harping on this for years. And every time money comes down the pike, we're not seeing that money for Berkshire County. And, and again, Mount Washington is an extreme example, but, your Clarksburgs, none of these people are getting very much money for roads, and it's not like they're getting any better. So somewhere, with all this money floating around, it seems that we ought to be able to carve off a little bit more for our communities here.
Yeah. So in good news, with the added time, and then again with this infrastructure bill being signed by the president in Washington, so we know now that it's reality and that there's going to be money in there for roads. This is an opportunity for more advocacy, for timely advocacy. And on one hand, what the MMA thought was best and what we try to, because we know this is something we can actually get past, is we try to raise the bottom line. Because if the total pool is bigger, then the amount distributed is also bigger. But,
that's true.
Let me finish. But so also, there's always bills we file and amendments we file to try to adjust the formula. But the reality is that's tougher because the overwhelming majority of communities in the state, and so therefore the overwhelming number of legislators aren't going to be for that. They're not going to do something. Nobody's going to vote for something that benefits 5 legislators and costs their communities money. So what I think would be good moving forward, and again, recognizing the potential of this infrastructure bill, is something like how we've been able to do the rural school aid. That is there a way that we can offer some kind of a bonus for the smallest towns without hurting the big towns that we have to watch out for? There's a reality. We can't sit back and assume they're going to be like, oh yeah, we'll take less money so the Berkshires can have money. But there's a way, I think, to do it that if we're looking for a bonus that they can support.
Okay, well, I'll be happy. Anytime you need me to come into the legislature to twist arms, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, you will, and we appreciate it.
I'm the kind of money that we're talking about. $100,000 would be huge from the town of Mount Washington. It's not going to make a dent in what Boston is going to get. And I realize that they've got 23 legislators, and all of Berkshire County has 4 now. But still, I think the case can be made that, come on, let a little pass for the small guys here. And again, I'd be happy to make that case. And I know that there are a lot of other community leaders that would be happy to try to make that case. I mean, come on. We have billions of dollars here. There's got to be a way to shake a little bit loose for Berkshire County.
Yep. No,
Thank you.
I agree.
And I appreciate you, Paul. I really do. I mean, I know you're doing the best you can. I just, I have this policy committee and, the MMA, and we talk about this all the time, and we get nowhere. And as much as I love the MMA, they're in a similar situation as the legislature. They have big communities and small communities, and it seems that the big communities always end up with the lion's share of the, with the pie, which is fine. They're bigger communities, but they should be able to shake a little bit more loose for us. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we can get a little bit cream for us.
Come on.
But let's work on it now. Is what I think is important. And if we have this, if we have like something tangible to present, even as early as January, then it's possible.
All right. Well, I'll try to give you a call next week, and we'll talk. Thank you very much.
I would love to come visit Mount Washington.
Well, you're always welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Get your have your 4-wheel drive, so you can get over the potholes.
Doug, you had a question or a comment.
Yeah, Doug McNally from the small town of Windsor also. One of the things that I'm concerned about, it's been a pet peeve, is the lack of the last mile transportation issue. I mean, there's a lot of discussion of big projects, and I'm not opposed to Pittsfield to Boston, North Adams to Boston train, Pittsfield to New York trains, bring in the tourists and all. Maybe that has to happen, but one of the big problems for Berkshire County is for the small towns, for people to have some kind of public transportation. Now, part of the federal bill is talking about money to allow people to stay in their homes as they age and live independently, so they don't have to go into assisted living or independent elderly living things. But the big issue for the small towns, for the hill towns, is once they can't drive, what do they do? And there are models for this. And I shared some stuff with Tom, and I'm talking to some folks about models elsewhere in the country. I'd like to make sure that somewhere in there, in this whole thing, there is some money set aside to set up a rural, on-demand, shared transportation for the last mile. It's got to happen.
Yep. No, I love that. And I feel like we've talked about this recently, it's a great idea, and it's possible. And I know, even like what Jim just said, that even with all this money coming through, I know we're in a different position than what I'm about to say. But the new mayor of Boston today announced she was sending some of the ARPA money that they're receiving directly into public transportation, into reducing fares and that kind of thing for public transit in Boston. And you're right, 100%. Like, we can't do that. We're not going to build a subway through Windsor, but we have the ability with this on-demand idea, and they've done it in places. There's models that definitely I think that can find it workable. So yeah, I think this is a great idea, and it's something, again, I would love to work on people with as we get the opportunity over this fiscal year and next fiscal year, and then God willing into 2023 to try to put a stamp on this. And with the infrastructure bill specifically, it's more what Doug is talking about, that this is something that there's these roadblocks that have been in existence for a long time, and the federal government is spending a lot of money that it hasn't spent. I think the president is saying since the interstate highway system. So let's think radically, and let's do things that we're not going to get another chance to do for 20, 30 more years.
And to Jim's point, this is one of the things where it's not just the Berkshires; it's 2/3 of the state. If you're
2/3 of the geography.
Beltway, if you're not inside, the 495, you got this problem.
Yep. Yeah, that's what kills us is 80% of the population lives in 20% of the geography. And no, unfortunately, nobody knows that better than us.
Well, Paul, I've got a question, and it has to do with, so the Baker administration has proposed their ideas about spending the money, and how is what the legislature proposing going to work with what the Baker administration wants to do? And I mean, how will these monies flow? Are they going to be all through earmarks, or are they going to go through programs? What's the plan?
It's going to be a blend. It's going to be a blend, and that's the thing. Is when I say like these are the areas of agreement. 720 million for healthcare, like that's going to mostly flow through the administration. And so whether some of it comes directly to public health boards, some of it comes to regional planning, I don't know, and some of it will end up in grants. But that's not going to be. These are places where it's not going to be earmarks we're talking about. Whereas, yeah, the earmarks we're able to get in, which for the most part aren't more than say $1 million per district. It's going to sound ridiculous, but $1 million per district out of a $4 billion bill really isn't that much of the proportion of the bill.
And then another kind of similar type question is you earlier mentioned that you were able to take some of the rainy day fund and blend it in with this bill. Are those going to have to be spent out by the end of this fiscal year in June?
Yeah. So not only by the end of this fiscal year, that's actually money from the fiscal year that already ended that has not been closed out yet. So the $1 billion is from fiscal 21.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty hard to do, isn't it? In some instances, to actually really spend it.
It's going to be that's why it's going through this funny mechanism, and it's a good problem to have, but it's nonetheless a problem that there's almost so much money coming in, they literally don't know what to do with it. And
I know what to do with it. I can fix it.
I can imagine.
Well, but Jim, could you? Are you in a position to actually spend that much money? Do you have your designs? Yeah. Do you have your permits? And all that?
I mean, all we need to do is pave roads. I mean, one of the things that, that people aren't getting, and the reason that the Chapter 90 formula is skewed as it is one that works, is, I can call up a contractor or a couple of contractors, and I can say, I need to pave, this 2 miles of East Street. Now, 2 miles of East Street is like, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000. Now, that's half of the town of Mount Washington's annual budget. All right. So, I can spend it. I can spend it on stuff that I can get done right away.
The point is, can you spend it before the end of June, I guess is my concern.
Well, let's see. Can I spend it before the end of June? Well, I mean, if I knew it was coming, we can start the bid process, and I could have people here doing some of these projects in April and May, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can. Small towns, it's not that much money, but we're not talking about projects that require a lot of engineering. We're talking about projects where you just need somebody to bring the material in. I mean, and I think that goes for a lot of towns. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of towns that have roads that just need to be paved that they haven't been able to get to for years, and that's not a huge project to undertake. So, yes, I believe that we could spend it by June.
All right, I guess I wonder if anyone else has some comments or questions.
Hey, it's Joe Diver from Dalton. Hey, good to see you again, Paul.
Hey.
We both got our ties off for tonight, right? So, that's good. Just kind of jumping on with what who was it that was speaking? Doug McNally on the transportation. One of the things I'm seeing in the role I play in my day job is healthcare and the social determinants of health. So it's like, how can we get innovative with transportation programs for rural areas? Whether it be shared card services or something of that nature. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to take these dollars and be as innovative as possible in the rural community. So any way I can help in those conversations, happy to do so.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Paul, and sorry take airtime. This is Doug again. One of the models I shared is a model where instead of having every town try to have senior transportation independently, we go to a countywide things through BRTA. And I've talked to, I'm on the board of BRTA also. And the bottom line is we need a countywide setup for this. And, there are counties that my sister lives in North Carolina where any senior citizen can get free transportation to any medical thing. It's a jitney shared transportation. The models are out there. We're just not using them. But I think we just need to put our corporate unified effort behind it and realize that it's a real serious problem.
Yeah, and they do it in Eastern Massachusetts with the ride. I mean, so it's not foreign to Massachusetts either. It's just coming up, and it's almost to what Tom said, that sometimes not knowing how to spend the money is almost as much of a problem as not having money, and getting a unified system going is important. But yeah, there's definitely a model. There's a model for it right here.
And so, Paul, with the various funding opportunities that you've been mentioning, is this, I mean, I think the term is microtransit, or that's part of it. Is there funding to do that? Do you know?
I believe there is. Yeah. And obviously to get something through the U.S. Senate, you have to consider, unlike Massachusetts, the U.S. Senate's representation equally, regardless of population. You have to be able to get these things passed by senators that live in Wyoming and South Dakota, or wherever, small states. So yeah, I bet, because a lot of it's directed towards roads and bridges, but I would almost bet that there's going to be opportunity for us to either be directed to do that or to take it with flexibility and turn it into that at the state level.
But also, one of the things that I learned in education is sometimes you need to reallocate existing resources. Yeah. And the bottom line is there are funds that used to be used for individual towns to have a council on aging bus and a driver and blah, blah, blah. And with regulations getting more stringent and so on and so forth, it doesn't work. But the money's still there. And instead of everybody trying to do it on their own, one of the models I looked at is that the RTA in the region contracts with all the Council on Aging, and the funding that the Council on Aging has from the government for it goes to the RTA to provide the service. So, I mean, we have to look at how we're spending the money we got also.
Yep. No, that's smart.
Well, the infrastructure money, Paul, how much say will the Massachusetts have on the specifics? So
yeah, I don't know yet. I'm sorry. I don't have an answer. Yeah.
Because I was reading somewhere that there's going to be like a big block grant in this big bucket, and there'll be a lot of latitude by the states to spend it as they want.
What we were being told, but this is when the potential for $3 trillion existed. What we were being told is, if I go into the House and I say I have a $40 million earmark, they laugh at me, unless it's an emergency. But 90% of the time they're going to laugh at you. They were saying that's realistic in this next thing that's coming. Now, all right, if that got cut in half the total, then maybe 20 million is realistic. And if we work as a delegation, there's 5 of us, maybe up to 80 million, that kind of range. So, but significant spending is what we are anticipating will be possible.
And, just to go on my other, my other thing, having the broadband infrastructure, having the telecommunications infrastructure is going to be critical to trying to do this, these public transportation, situations where you're trying to get people, on rides, somehow they have to be able to connect and contact the bus to be able to get that ride to them. So again, you're talking about communications, upgrading the communications networks here in Berkshire County to give the opportunities for these, mini, transit situations. I mean, it's all part of the same thing on top of having, roads that aren't going to break the buses. I mean, there's all of this stuff goes together. So, I mean, we just need to, whine and bellyache for our share, Paul. We just gotta cry as much as we can, try to get this thing on the ball. Thank you.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. And about the communications part too, that, there's no ride share if no one can contact anybody. Speaker to Leo 3-4 years ago, when we were doing the Uber bill, he there was a group of us and he said, "You, Paul, what do you do for Uber in Peru?" I said, "Well, Speaker, I stick a flag in the front yard and the horse and buggy." So, reality, if you can't communicate with anybody, there's no way to do any of it. So. No wonder they want me to go to the Senate.
You're asking for trouble there, Paul. You know that, don't you?
You're one of 40, you can make a lot more noise. I'll tell you that.
Well, we're expecting it too.
You can also get in a lot more trouble.
Let's hope.
Hey, Tom, I have a question for Paul. You mentioned in your list, I think it was 600 million for public housing. Mm-hmm. And I know it's very important down there in Boston because the housing is so expensive down there. Yeah. But up in Berkshire County, recently the housing market has, like everywhere else, exploded, and it's very difficult for our young people to afford to buy a home. And so really new apartments are really becoming, I think, a sought after place to live, also with people moving into our community, and you could also work from home. So what are your thoughts of how some of that funding could be used for Berkshire County in regards to public housing?
Yeah, that was some of the earmarks that we filed too, was actually for housing that were accepted on the various sides. But again, until we know what the final product is, I'm not going to champion it. But I mean, we have affordable land. We have now access to infrastructure in the form of broadband. We have, with that infrastructure in broadband, we have the opportunity to attract people from around the region, around the state, and people want to come here. And who was telling me this? I was on the WTBR telethon this morning, and they said a house in Melrose sold for $450,000. It was burned down, and they bought it. That's how expensive things in the East are. So for $450,000, I mean, think about what you can get out here. So the opportunity exists if we are smart and if we take advantage of this moment again. But we also have to think, I've been telling people this for a long time with broadband and stuff, start thinking about what you want your community to look like, because we want the people that come in, we want them ideally to actually be residents of our area, because, to redistricting, to the census. Now, we did a great job with the census. We beat expectations, but if we don't do something in the next 9 years, we're going to go from 4 members to 3. We can't sit back and let this keep happening. But I think we're primed to take advantage. It's just we can't let it all be Airbnb, I guess. And when we talked with Mayor Tyre, me and Tricia and Adam, she presented to us what their findings were in the city, and housing was the number one concern at the 4 public hearings that they had. That was what came back. So the people are demanding this. So I think we should try to make something happen for real.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Paul, that's a good segue. I don't know, we haven't had too much dialogue with you, but over this past year, the Planning Commission has been working with One Berkshire and a group of housing practitioners on a strategy. And what we'd like to do is kind of work with, give a preview to the delegation over the next few weeks. I'd like to get your help setting that up possibly.
Yeah, that would be great.
This is Doug again from Windsor. When we talk about housing, we need to realize that there's multiple levels of that. There's affordable housing for low-income people, and it's very important, and that's got to happen, so on and so forth. But with particularly what's happening in South County, there's affordable housing for professionals. And I think that sometimes gets lost. When I was principal at Taconic, I had trouble hiring teachers because they could not find good middle income apartments.
Yeah.
So I think that the focus on low income housing needs to be there, but I don't think that can be the only focus.
Doug, you're jumping the gun. We have that as an agenda item later on, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in the meeting. Christine has her hand raised.
Thank you. My concern ties in with the housing issue, but it's the infrastructure of water and sewer. And that, as you know, Stockbridge has just a wonderful environment, but we have a beautiful lake and we have homes that are on septic systems that surround the lake. And this is now becoming a problem as we look at the cost of trying to get sewer lines or alternative systems to that area. So rather than just look at sewers, the whole idea of funding for alternative systems and being able to have clusters be able to use those systems, I think is important, and I think is something that needs funding. And I also think as we look at the zoning open space residential design, you keep the open space, you keep your underlying zoning, but you allow homes to be more on smaller lots. And this is another area where the alternative systems and having funding and everything that is required to put those in place, I think could be something that should be in the legislation and in the budget allowances someplace.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense too, for sure. And having it available to individuals, because when I bought the house in Peru, I remember the septic failed and we had to go to the alternative system. It was a major, it was a $30,000 expense that no one was expecting.
They're very expensive, and for older people who want to move into something smaller, and then they find out that they have to fix their septic system before they can sell. You're creating a system where they have no alternatives because they can't, even though they're going to get money for their house, they have to purchase something else. So it's a vicious circle, and I just don't want it to get lost in the discussion of issues that are important. I agree with all of the other issues that have been raised, but just adding to your workload.
No, but it's a great point, so thank you for saying it.
Well, Paul, I really want to thank you for making the time here. You're certainly welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting if you want.
I'm going to eat.
Well, you can do that.
You see, I have the internet, so you know I'm not at home. But thanks for having me here. I do appreciate it, and everyone that talked about working on something into the future, like let's do it. This is the time. So please be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, moving on to ratification of committee members. Now, Tom, the BRPC needs to vote on that list, correct?
Yes, yes, they do. You've made the appointments, and they need to ratify them, so we need a vote on that.
Okay, so the lists for the committees are in your packets. Can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so who made that motion again? I'm sorry.
Jim Lovejoy
Okay, Jim.
Seconded.
All right. Thank you. I
and
should know
Kyle.
those.
Yeah, Jim Lovejoy made the motion. Kyle seconded.
Right,
You ready for the call?
ready.
Duval,
Yes.
Traub,
Yes.
Diver,
Yes.
Pachano,
Aye.
Davis Hassan,
Yes.
Donovan,
Yes.
Lovejoy,
Yes.
Hanlon,
Yes.
Irvin, Schubert. We can come back to them. Satterthwaite, Rasmussen,
Yes.
Hudson. Sarah, do them. That was yes. Gagnon,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
and McNally.
Yes.
Any chance Irvin, Schubert, or Satterthwaite? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the SEDS Annual Report for 2021. I'll pass it over to Tom to introduce Laura.
Yes, so this is an annual report that we have to do, part of our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This is actually the last year we'll be doing this annual report for this plan, because next year we have to do a new 5-year plan. And Laura Brennan, our Economic Development Program Manager, will be giving a briefing on what's in this update report.
Thank you. Good to be here and to share our report for this year with you. I'd like to share my screen and go through a brief presentation of some of the findings. And it looks like I have permission to do that, so that's good. I'll hit share, and please let me know if you're seeing the first slide of a PowerPoint. Looks good? Okay.
Yes.
So as Tom mentioned, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy is produced by BRPC with, it's done with guidance of a strategy committee, a standing SEDS committee, and our most recent 5-year document dates back to 2017. So after this year, we will be starting the process of developing and building a new SEDS that will run 2022 through 2027. And these annual reports that we are doing in intervening years help us to keep an eye on trends. That's what I'd like to talk with you tonight about, and how we track progress on the agreed upon goals and priority projects that are listed in this report. A SEDS is both a document and really an ongoing process, in that it provides a mechanism to gather regional partners and to agree upon our intentions and then to pursue those together. I'm seeing that. Okay, here we go. So certain performance measures are tracked each year. Using the most recent available data, we can see that labor force in Berkshire County decreased by 3.6%, or about 2,300 people between the years of 2019 and 2020. Labor force is defined as those employed and those actively seeking employment. So this was the sharpest drop in a decade. And in part, it reflects the high number of people 65 and older who were in our labor force prior to 2020. Essentially, the two age cohorts that have grown in the last decade are those between the ages of 16 and 24, and those 65 and older. So that 65 and over cohort is growing in Massachusetts and the nation as well, but not nearly to the same proportion as is happening in Berkshire County. I'm having trouble, sorry, getting my slides to advance. Okay. Okay. The annual unemployment rate rose to 9.1% from 2019 to 2020, exceeding the previous peak rate of 8.5% in 2010. Early 2021 figures show an abatement of these high rates, but the annual average is still likely to be well above the 2019 levels. Keep in mind that these figures are countywide, but several municipalities have suffered much higher unemployment rates since the start of the pandemic. In fact, 6 Berkshire municipalities were at least one percentage point higher than the national average over the last 24 months. Those were Adams, Beckett, Hinsdale, Lenox, North Adams, and Pittsfield. The median household income in Berkshire County increased by 4.5% from 2018 to 2019. Those are the latest figures that were available as we developed this report. That continues to lag behind the nation and the statewide measures. We do continue to trend upwards, and although we remain lower than most of our neighboring although we remain lower than most of our neighboring counties, there was some positive news in that our annual growth rate for median household income exceeded all of our neighbors, with the exception of only Rensselaer County in New York. The per capita income for Berkshire County rose by 3.9%, again using 2018 to 2019 figures. In this measurement, Berkshire County typically fares better than the nation, but is well below Massachusetts. We can again see some positive news in that the Berkshire County per capita income grew as the national figure was leveling off over the same period, and our per capita income growth rate of 2.6% was among the highest growth rate of our neighboring counties. Our 5-year SEDS identifies goals aligned with 6 key themes. These goals, put simply, are to stabilize and strengthen the region's workforce, to create a diverse and robust business and entrepreneurial environment, to invest in infrastructure and site improvements, to increase regional and interregional collaboration, to support and expand the region's industry and occupational clusters, and to support the resiliency of individual businesses and the regional economy as a whole during future economic disruptions. These are the goals in the current SEDS. As we move forward into next year, we'll be taking a look at these, potentially blending some, potentially adding some new, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, I just want to share that a wide range of agencies and organizations advance Berkshire County towards these goals on an ongoing basis. These are not wholly the responsibility of any one organization, but it is really, truly a region-wide effort. And there are many, many, many organizations involved in that. For each of these themes, I'd like to just highlight one of the many activities that occurred over the last year. Under talent and workforce, the Berkshire Workforce Board secured $225,000 to train 70 nursing assistants through online and daytime programs led by Berkshire Health Systems and BCC. With the healthcare and social assistance sector projected to grow very strongly over the next 5 to 10 years in Massachusetts, programs like this are critical in preparing our residents for the workplace of the future. The Berkshire Innovation Center, which held its grand opening just days before the widespread shutdown went into effect, has been busy helping local manufacturers pivot production lines and handle supply chain challenges, while also adding metal 3D printing capabilities and more recently launching a virtual and augmented reality simulations lab. Mass DOT invested more than $10 million in infrastructure through road resurfacing and bridge maintenance and replacements across 7 communities in Berkshire County. Under collaboration, this is something that's ongoing and something we're working on heavily right now, with support and involvement from Berkshire United Way, Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation, Milltown Capital, and with funding from an EDA CARES Act grant, as well as local community partners. An overhaul of the Berkshire Benchmarks website is underway. We'll be excited to share with you this site as it becomes unveiled. We're anticipating by April of 2022 that this will go live. And we, in fact, had our kickoff meeting with the selected web developers today. Berkshire Agricultural Ventures helped support our occupational and industry clusters by securing, and this is just one of many USDA grants that they've secured over the last year, a $500,000 grant to expand their loan program and provide technical assistance with a focus on meat processing and agroforestry. This is particularly critical our farmers have recently lost access to some of the cold and frozen storage facilities that they've been using. And finally, as an example of forward progress under economic resiliency, the COVID-19 Adaptation Fund was made possible through an earmark secured by Senator Hines and supported 40 for-profit and nonprofit businesses with grants of up to $12,000 and prioritized BIPOC-owned businesses, a population that was disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So I just picked one out of long lists of representative activity under each of our goals, and I'd be happy to talk through any of the others with you. You have the full document in your meeting packet. Tracking of priority projects is also an important part of our ongoing process, and we separate our list into the three major categories shown here. Our running list now stands at 45 priority projects countywide, including 8 which were added this year, both programmatic and physical construction projects. The section focused on programs and initiatives. We added 3 new projects, the common thread among them being a focus on workforce development. The C4 initiative with MCLA as a backbone organization establishes career pathways in arts and culture for area students. The Digital Economy Build to Scale process is a partnership of One Berkshire and the Berkshire Innovation Center to map assets and gaps with the goal of an increased number of technology businesses in the region. We see this as particularly important given the increased focus on remote work. And the Berkshire Skills Cabinet, which was actually created in 2016 and is ongoing and was just added this year as a priority, is led by the Berkshire Workforce Board and convenes education, economic, and workforce agencies to set regional workforce priorities as part of a statewide network. We also added 5 physical construction projects, 2 in the Northern Berkshires, 1 in Central, and 2 in the Southern Berkshires. BAMTech is a proposed $4 million manufacturing training center that will also house makerspace and incubator facilities to accommodate artisans, designers, developers, and entrepreneurs. The North Adams Adventure Trail will connect Williamstown and North Adams by way of the Tourist Resort Campus and NORAD Mill. Site 9 at the William Stanley Business Park in Pittsfield is the largest and most prominent parcel at that site and is in need of an additional $6.25 million to complete site improvements and prepare the site for redevelopment. Kemble Street Studios is a relatively new proposed project of the Berkshire Film and Media Collaborative. It is envisioned as a mixed studio and classroom environment, currently anticipated to be placed at the campus of Shakespeare and Company in Lenox, and able to support modern film and media making, including production and post-production work. And the Berkshire Cottages at 100 Bridge Street in Great Barrington is a pending affordable housing project for the CDC of South Berkshire and includes a mix of rental units and home ownership. For these last 2 annual reports, we've also been digging into the ongoing impacts of the pandemic through an addendum to our annual submission. Here are some initial takeaways that I'd like to just talk through with you briefly. With a handful of monthly exceptions, Berkshire County's unemployment rate remained worse than the state and the nation's rates throughout the pandemic. We were hit harder at the onset in April of 2020 at 17.2% versus 16.4% in Massachusetts and 14.8% in the US. And as of July of this year, we were still at 6.3% versus 4.9% for Massachusetts and 5.4% for the nation. The decline in labor force in Berkshire County has also been significant, as I mentioned earlier, and is disproportionate with state numbers in labor force, decline, given our population size. And some of this, as I mentioned, is explained by a higher proportion of 65 and over workers going into the pandemic who we could have expected to retire and may have retired a bit early. But this decrease still does raise concerns. Combining the nominal unemployment rates as above and the labor force data, our adjusted unemployment rate trends outpace the state and nation's adjusted unemployment rates even more dramatically. That all said, the relief programs that have been available to us have certainly helped to prevent pandemic impacts from being even worse. As of September of 2021, more than 4,000 PPP or Paycheck Protection Program loans were dispersed to Berkshire County businesses by the SBA. The majority of those were for less than 150,000, but in total, over 375 million was provided to support businesses in the Berkshires. We're in the process of digging deeper into PPP activity industry by industry to see how this program helped, or in some cases maybe was not well accessed by employers in our region. Understanding who didn't successfully access these funds will help us to understand what types of technical assistance need to be offered so that business owners can be better prepared for economic disruptions in the future. And a range of other programs also supported our economy, from the CDBG funding of up to $25,000 for micro enterprises to smaller programs through the Mass Attorney General's program and the Adaptation Fund earmark mentioned earlier, all of which have BRPC has helped to administer. So we'll continue to be tracking pandemic effects into next year through the process of developing our next SEDS, which will be ongoing over the next 14 months. Lastly, I'd like to briefly touch on the Regional Investment Database, which began in 2018 at the suggestion of our SEDS committee. Through this custom-built tool, we document real estate and capital investments over a threshold of $100,000. We use 45 unique variables to understand the location, related industry, size, and funding source for each project. So far, we've added over 420 records, representing nearly $2.9 billion in notable investments. I can say with assurance that we have not cataloged as many as have occurred. We can only capture those that are either reported in the media or that we can find through permitting records. But we do feel that we have a very good handle on the trends that these numbers can tell us. So here are just a few ways that compiling this information can help us understand those trends. Figure 1 shows how many major projects are on the horizon. You can see that the lighter green number of 95 are pending projects that we currently have in the database. Figure 2 indicates the scale of those projects in terms of dollars. And Figure 3 demonstrates for all of the recorded projects in the database what the source of funding was or will be. So this is an example of why we ask the Commission to endorse this report each year with permission to continue to make changes and updates until we submit this to the EDA in December. We'd like to keep adding major investments as they're announced. And we would also like to, as time allows, be able to make adjustments to our tracking of unemployment numbers month by month as those come out and are available for tweaking our 24-month averages. So what's next is to make those final updates to a Commission endorsed document after this evening's meeting to submit the 2021 annual report to EDA in December, and then to begin work on developing the 2022 to 2027 Berkshire County SEDS. In some ways, we've already begun our work on that because the CARES Act grant that we received earlier this year includes funding to have a much expanded economic resiliency chapter. So we'll be working on, we're already working on that, and then all other components of the SEDS will begin in 2022. And we'll continue to deliver the activities of the EDA CARES Act grant overall, which is a 2-year project that is running through early 2023. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm happy to answer questions. or clarify anything from the trends that I provided an overview of.
Tom, I got something quickly if I can.
Yes, go ahead.
Laura, I was wondering if you have any data or if you see any correlation, and I don't mean to get ahead of the meeting here with regard to housing, but I'm wondering if there's a correlation between the decline in the labor force and housing availability in the county.
That's a really interesting possible correlation. I can't say that we have been able to find figures that make that connection directly yet. And I will also say that housing is not a focus of the SEDS. The types of metrics that we track tend to have to do with employment specifically and income, but I think it's an interesting connection that we should be investigating. We've been talking a lot about what makes up that drop in labor force, and I think that no single answer is going to give us a complete understanding of it. We know that there were a high number of people 65 and older in the labor force before that number increased to that degree. But we also know that there are people retiring early who are younger than that. There are lots and lots of impacts that may be telling.
Pedro, I guess I have a question for you. Do you have some thoughts about how we might track that? That seems like it would be a very hard correlation to make somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I mean, I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories. We heard, one, and I don't mean to say that it was anecdotal, about teachers not being difficult to find because of housing. I've heard General Dynamics has had some issues finding workers. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I'm not a data guy. I'm just a dumb architect. So.
No. You're a very knowledgeable housing guy. So I
just pay attention to some of I pay attention to some of these things, and most of it is anecdotal. But I would be fascinating because I think it's happening. I think it's a real thing.
This is Doug. I know that from my work on the workforce board, employers are saying that the lack of affordable housing is impacting their ability to grow their workforce. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's hard data, but again, it's anecdotal. It's there that, on the recruitment problems, bringing people in, General Dynamics was mentioned, the teachers were mentioned, but small employers even more so are finding it difficult to recruit when quality affordable housing isn't available.
Right.
If I might,
I mean, it makes sense that it's affecting our ability to replace. Sorry, I was just going to say it makes sense that it's impacting our ability to replace people that would be leaving the workforce naturally anyway, and that we're not making up those departures with new additions.
We've had, such a disruption in housing. Right now we're at crisis levels, and it's a combination of COVID created part of this problem because the folks that came here and found you could work here and stay here, that you didn't have to go back to the city, and our housing prices were very affordable compared to people moving especially out of the larger cities where, what we have is so much more affordable. But a big other part of getting rid of some of the inventory, especially good rental property, was the Airbnb market exploded, and folks found that, you could rent a nice home for, say $1,800 to $2,000 a month, but you could also get that for a weekend. And, the demand on that stock was so heavy, especially with COVID, because a lot of people flocked to this area and decided to stay. So I think it was both like a two-sided sword. It devastated the housing market, and we are still a terrible crisis mode, although we're starting to see a a little bit of leveling off and the pricing starting to get a little bit more affordable. But we get calls all the time. You know, we're trying to hire somebody. What do you have for inventory? And I sit on the rental housing board, and every landlord, you know, and every property manager is like, we don't have housing to offer. And it is crisis mode.
Well, John, this will require a vote, so.
Sure, and just to add to just my 2 cents with the general dynamics, you know, we hire young engineers that come from outside this area. And when they accept the position here, and it's just adding to the conversation, is they're looking for affordable housing for someone that's just starting out. And South County sometimes seems to be a little bit expensive, and then you turn to North County, we have the old housing stock, as I always say, and that's why we're trying to create new housing in Adams. So just adding to the conversation, it's a problem throughout. Okay, so this report needs to be accepted correctly, Tom, by the BRPC.
I move we accept the report.
Second, Doug McNally.
First by Roger Bolton, seconded by Doug McNally. Duval?
Yes.
Traub?
Yes.
Diver?
Yes.
Pachano?
Yes.
Davis Hassan?
Yes.
Donovan?
Yes.
Lovejoy?
Yes.
Hanlon?
Yes.
Irvin? Schubert?
Sheila, you were muted, Sheila. If you
Whoops. Is she there? Irvin?
The answer is yes from Schubert.
All right. Thanks.
Irvin also, yes.
Great. Satterthwaite?
Yes.
Rasmussen?
Yes.
Hudson?
Yes.
Gagnon?
Yes.
Bolton?
Yes.
McNally?
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, we have one more discussion item, housing education discussion, which falls right in line with what we've been talking about. Tom, did you want to start this one off?
Yeah, I'll start it off. So, I mean, I think we've already started it, as you've said.
Yeah.
We all know that there is a crisis housing crisis in Berkshire County. And to your point, Doug, it's all types of housing units. We need more market rate. We need more rental. We need more affordable housing. We need more subsidized housing. Every sector needs housing. And you know, a few months ago, we had what I thought was a great discussion at a commission meeting about some of the key issues. And we've been working with a group of housing practitioners over this past year and have come up with a strategy. We're just about to kind of go public with it. We're not quite there yet. But one of the elements that's going to be the part of it and part of the action strategy is really what can communities, municipalities do to promote housing, and what are some of the tools that they need or want? What do you all need and want to work in your community to be able to promote housing development? You know, for instance, is it regulations about short-term rentals? If those are the problems, is it more help with looking at accessory dwelling units, or is it just getting support for housing projects in general? There seems to be a lot of local opponents to opposition to some housing projects. So the Berkshire BRPC has a commission development committee that is really designed to help design educational programs. And we're looking for some feedback from you all as to what would be the most useful. So hopefully we can get some discussion going.
Hey,
So
Tom. Joe
no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Joe Deere from Dalton. Certainly the ADU, I think, is a good opportunity for many of the communities to think through, and Dalton specifically is looking at moving forward bylaw changes. So education for the community for the purposes of those would be, I think, generally helpful as we
let's spend a little bit of time on ADUs, because, you know, over my career, we've really tried to promote those, and they haven't been all that readily accepted in the communities. And so what are some of the things that folks hear that why they're not really welcomed in as tools? And so that's the type of material we need to kind of overcome. If there's misconceptions or just not knowing what they are, what are some of the items?
Hey, Tom, from the town of Lanesboro and sitting on the planning board, I've watched the process of passing bylaw regulations to the town. And I think the most important thing is the way, you know, you educate and present. You have to make sure, you know, you provide a good concept. We did a setup where the accessory dwelling unit had to be smaller. First of all, sold on the premise that we have a housing crisis, and you couldn't ask for a better time to be selling ADUs. Say a family wanted to have a guest quarters for a family member, or they wanted to, you know, have a younger person come home, or whatever they wanted to use it for. It had to be smaller in size, and that the word accessory makes that make sense. And, you know, it didn't seem like there was any kind of a harmful downside to it. So I think it's all in education and packaging it up. We didn't see in the first year a lot of demand for accessory dwelling unit building, but I think that was the big fear, was there was going to be all of a sudden, you know, 200 houses going up, and all of a sudden it's going to impact your educational system and, you know, growth in your community and overtaxi all kinds of services. And as an example town, and I think it's something Mr. Diver from Dalton might want to know, is how many communities are actually already have ADUs and how many units actually were added, just to sort of squash the fear factor. And that's always been the case in most communities. Whenever you put out a projection for affordable housing or market rate properties, is all of a sudden people get crazy. It's like, what's going to come into our community? And this NIMBY thing happens. And it's like, no, provide the facts, and I think you can sell the product better.
I absolutely agree. Great point.
Yeah, well, this is something that I've heard, is that even though communities do have ADU bylaws on the books, that they're not being developed. These units are not being developed. And I guess I was curious as to what some of the barriers might be for that. Is it cost?
Well, in the last year or 2 years, we've had a worldwide pandemic and the cost of construction doubling and gouging going on in the construction industry. So I would effectively say that it probably is a combination of both of those things. Once we get to the other side and start seeing a little, and I am seeing it now, just a little bit of the downsides of cost of construction. And, you know, a lot of people, maybe it's publicizing it. Maybe it hasn't been put out there to, you know, a grand degree to all of the homeowners in the communities. It'd be certainly good to hear whatever other community that has ADUs, have they seen actual growth in building?
I don't know. Does anybody want to answer that? We have a couple of hands. Is that related to that, Pedro or Jim, or is that off?
Well, my concern is, and again, what we're seeing in Mount Washington is that any development seems to be being used for Airbnb. You know, people who are, you know, building additions into their homes, you know, are not doing it to provide, you know, housing for people to live in, but they're using it as income generating for, you know, the Airbnb market, and it's for a small town like ours, it's very difficult to to supervise and manage it and try to make these folks conform to our local bylaws, and it really is a problem. People say, "Well, I want to have a apartment over my garage for my great granddaughter," and the next thing you know, they've got folks coming in and they're renting it for $1,000 a weekend. It's crazy. So I mean, coupled with any kind of development is going to have to be the ability to manage this kind of a market because of our area. We're not developing housing for people to come and live and work. We're developing housing for vacationers. And I'm not sure that that's going to help because we don't have any housing for the waiters and the waitresses that are going to work in the restaurants to serve them. Thank you.
Pedro, you had this.
Yeah, I got a couple things. So I'm in Great Barrington, for those of you who don't know. We've had an ADU law in place for about 12 years now, I think. And it's my understanding, the first 8 or so years, the town saw 2 applications for ADUs. In the last year and a half, 2 years, the planning board, I'm on the planning board, we've worked to change the not only the ADU bylaw, but also the amount that a person can actually do on their lot. So currently in Great Barrington, you can have a 2-family or 2 separate structures plus an ADU on your lot. So let's say you have 3 families or a big house that you could divide into a 3-family. You could do that on your lot. The other thing we did with ADUs was to increase the size from 650 to 900 square feet. And we've done that within the last 2 years. And already we've seen 3 applications that I can think of on the top of my head come through the planning board. So that might be something that would make it a little bit more, enticing for people to do in your communities. As far as selling ADUs, the practicalities of construction have to be taken into account. So if you put an ADU on your lot, you have to make sure that your septic system can handle an extra bedroom. And a lot of people can't do that. So when you're selling this kind of thing and people are telling you, oh my God, we're going to have massive amounts of construction. Well, there are lots of things that are going to prevent people from actually being able to do that. So that, dig deep and kind of think about things that just inhibit construction just from the beginning to try to sell these things to people. Because as Ms. David stated, it's true. People, whenever you propose any kind of change to this development system that we've had across the country here for the last almost 100 years, the changes the feelings are of fear, and fear that that you're going to change everything, that everything is going to change, and that my little community is suddenly going to become a big city or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, I would encourage you guys to, if you're trying to sell these things to your community, to really think about the practicalities of construction and whether or not those things would work for the people in the communities. I'd like to also mention that maybe you guys should, if you're worried about short-term rentals, that you should pay attention to what's going on here in our town. I'm on a housing subcommittee here, and we've got a proposed regulation going through right now, and the discussions are getting ready to happen. And it's quite interesting, the way that our community looks at short-term rentals. I think everybody really needs to think hard about it, because it's what I have found in my research, and we've had the benefit of recently having a housing needs assessment done for Great Barrington, so that has been a great help. But there are many people in your own communities, I am sure, that rely on short-term rentals, that need them to survive, that need them to stay in their homes. And I know a lot of communities, including my own, that we rely a lot on second homeowners who do rent their homes on a short-term basis to sustain our economic, system here. So it's not just, I'm of the belief that it's not just people coming in and investing, or people coming in and taking advantage of our sort of tourist market here. It's a very complex issue that's not really that simple, particularly, in the region that we live in. So just as an aside, if anybody's interested, if any of you like to attend, select board meetings and planning board meetings, I think we set a date for the 8th or for the 5th Friday, sorry, the 25th of this month, if you want to either pay attention or tune into the meeting, because it'll be a joint meeting of the select board and the planning board to discuss this current bylaw. And if anybody's interested in reading what the proposal is, you can contact me and I'm happy to send it to you. I think that's all I have.
Well, that was, helpful. You're absolutely right that the short-term rental discussion is not simple, and I didn't, really mean to have the discussion to focus on necessarily either ADU or short-term rental, but really, what can we do to make your work easier in your communities related to housing? What type of educational material can we get out? Can we work with you on, or how can we help is what we're really trying to get at. So any other thoughts? Buck, you have.
Sure. You said about help. We did a 40R lot and Eagle Mill is taking off. It looks like, hopefully, cross your fingers. But I tell you, the biggest hurdle is when you say workforce housing or affordable housing, what a lot of people think of that. And you instantly get a pushback. And it's very difficult. We had a tough time, and we're still having a tough time with selling the Eagle Mill to people, the whole project. So I think if we could get people's what they think of what affordable housing is, if they could get a better grasp on that, that would help a lot. If they renamed it, I don't know. As soon as you say that to people, they think that it's, Section 8 or totally subsidized, and they have a tough time with it. So.
Yeah, I guess I wonder, one of the things that we've been thinking about is there some kind of a campaign that we could work on? And I guess I'm wondering, having people tell stories about, how hard it is for, say, a fireman or a teacher to find housing, would that resonate? Have it be personalized.
That's exactly right. People that are just starting out, and it's a sliding scale income, what they pay, it's a good system. But a lot of the public don't see it that way.
Yeah, I agree with Buck. I think language matters. And I think even in this meeting, we've talked a little bit about, the term affordable housing has been said, when what we're really talking is houses that people who are in the workforce, or people who work for and are making a decent wage, can afford to live in, not people who are struggling with their careers or with other things. So I totally agree with you, Buck, that language really matters. And so when we say affordable housing, we either have to be clear that what we're talking about is people that are making a certain income level, not people that are in the workforce. Because I just spoke with somebody today who's a very successful market person here in South Berkshire, and she can't find a house. So that's kind of what I think a lot of times what we're talking about. It's just an affordability problem, not that there's, that we need to create housing just for people that are meeting a certain sort of threshold of income.
This is Doug. I want to jump in.
I think you used a phrase that I think would be really good to use: workforce housing.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is, and I'll call the elephant out, race. I mean, basically, when you talk about affordable housing, if you go to town of Windsor, where I live, and you talk about affordable housing, they think that you're trying to put housing up for minority people that they don't want in their town. And I'm sorry that that exists in this town, but it does. So I think if we really want to have housing for a workforce, as bad as it seems to be to deal with the devil, we may not want to call it affordable housing. We might want to do a renaming and call it, workforce housing, employment housing, employment, assisted housing, something like that.
Yeah, good point, Doug. I'm thinking housing for our workers is what we need.
Something like that,
Yeah.
Housing for the workers. You get one Berkshire and, work the workforce board in on it and put it forth as something, sorry to say it, folks, not about minority people or poverty people. We need to address that also. I'm not saying don't address that, but the issue we're talking about isn't that.
Yeah, I love that idea. Just to tie into that, Doug, is the workforce. And another challenge or opportunity we have is the age-friendly or age-in-place, because we do have some families that have sold their homes for one reason or another, but they can't find affordable housing, and they're at that the senior age. They move in with down south or wherever, but they really would like to stay in the Berkshires. But another opportunity for affordable housing for our community members who have lived a very, very long time, but had to sell their house for one reason or another and want to stay in town.
Yeah, we hear a lot about that, Joe. I mean, that's an important need as well. As I said, all aspects of housing were in a real crisis mode here in the Berkshires. Yeah. But so we got some other folks. Kent, you haven't spoken yet. You want to say something?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't think I was next in line. I'll just, okay. Hi, everybody. Building on what's recently been said, it seems also to me, going back to what you said about personalizing and personal stories, it might be useful to have some communication that defines what affordability means. Because when you put some idea, many of us, especially those of us who live in rural communities who would end up voting on bylaw changes, own our homes. It's been a while since we had to think about the affordability of our housing. And to put that back into stories and just the anecdotes that we've been hearing about the types of workers, the types of people, the types of income levels that we're talking about that are not being matched by the available housing, it then casts that term affordability, to the extent we still use it, in a broader light, and allows people to start to imagine, oh, I see, it's not what the sort of thing Doug was giving voice to, that we're thinking, that many people might be thinking. It's bigger than that. And that helps build what we mean by workforce housing as well, although it's not just workforce, but it's any kind of people trying to move laterally, coming into the area, whether it's to seek a job or to get away from a city or what have you. So I think, some material from that angle as well is helping clarify what, might be meant by affordability. What does that actually look like in various scenarios? That's
maybe we should ask people, can you afford to buy your own home right now?
right. If your home went back on the market, could you afford it?
Could you afford it?
Already selling it to come up with the capital to buy it.
It's terrible right now.
Christine, is your hand up, Christine?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But this is going back to the ADU discussion. And one place that we seem to get have a problem with our ADU is trying to figure out how the building code can be met with an older house that you're changing into an ADU. And our building inspector was looking at what we were talking about and trying to fit it within the code, and just felt there was quite a bit of unknown information on how this would go forward. And I think for people who are thinking about constructing an ADU in their home, particularly, it's important for them before they start the whole process to really know what is required. Do you need two exits from the second floor? And probably, but how do you do that within the building code and not conflict with a lot of the bylaws that want you to keep the front of your home looking like a single family home? That is something that we ran into.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If we're going to try to promote ADUs, we need to make it as simple as possible for folks to be able to do that. Good. Barb, is your hand raised anew?
Yeah, just listening to all the discussions. I made a few notes along the way. To me, zoning and some of the communities that kind of went a little bit crazy in requiring, 3-acre parcels with 200 feet of frontage might want to look at changing that to the point of allowing people to subdivide their parcels to be, allow a little bit more room for more housing on it. Also, we talk a lot about septic systems as one of the, the prohibitive natures of why you can't increase and add another ADU because your lot doesn't allow. I think we have probably one of the most archaic Title V regulations that if you watch these systems get built and how they're used and how they're maintained or not maintained, we've got to get into the 21st century and look around the nation to see what other states have a more modern way to dispose of waste to make it easier to create a building lot, because that typically is, if you can't pass a perk test, if you're in a high groundwater table, there's got to be technology out there to help advance the growth of housing in that nature. One of the things I also was thinking about is senior housing projects, so 55 and up communities probably haven't been built in Berkshire County in a long time. And I'm thinking that if we work towards a countywide effort to provide more of the 55 and up housing, it will open up the inventory of seniors that would look forward to living in a community that they could have all the maintenance work taken care of for themselves and leave their large homes that are really hard to maintain. And I also lastly wanted to comment on the gentleman from Windsor. Your town does not have the monopoly on race problems. And it is sad. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Barb. I think your comment about changing the septic system rules will have to go to the state level. I don't think we're going to be able to get that done in Berkshire County.
I get that. I'd be happy to talk to our friend Paul Mark because he knows it better than most.
Yes, I'm sure. Or maybe our senator to be. Huh?
Senator to be. Yep.
Doug, is your hand again, or is that just from before? Must be
from before.
Okay. Well, this has been good. I've gotten some ideas in terms of educational topics. If you are, if you're trying to promote housing in your community and want some help with something, feel free to give me a call. We did recently hire someone who has housing expertise, and over this year, hopefully we'll be able to focus on that quite a bit more as we try to implement this strategy that we've been developing regionally. So, Pedro, I see your hand again. Is that from before, or no?
Oh, I don't want to monopolize the meeting here, but the one thing that I have recently, or one idea that has recently come before me, having to do with education is educating not just the community, but actually educating our town halls on different ways that they could actually fund the construction of housing. I recently was speaking with a developer here in town, and as you all probably know, that the number one or the most expensive part of developing is financing. So we kind of were brainstorming a little bit, and we were wondering if there is such a thing as selling bonds, for example, like our town can sell bonds on which they can then lend at a low interest rate to developers who are developing either whatever it is type of housing that you want to develop. So I think if there was some kind of menu that municipalities can tap into and that they knew about, because none of our leaders, nobody on the planning board knows of anything like that. So if there was something, I think it'd be really great. Because the reality is that, and if you look at the history of most of your towns, there was never this moment where your town leaders all of a sudden decided and said, okay, let's make a neighborhood here, let's make a neighborhood here, let's build 50 houses there and 50 houses there. I could tell you Great Barrington, basically the majority of our housing stock is older than 1950, and most of it was built by the mill owners that were here for the 100 and some years that they occupied the Housatonic, valley here around Main Street and up on Monument Mills in Housatonic. Practically the whole neighborhood of Housatonic, that little town, was all of the housing there was created by the Monument Mills. So we've never really had, and it'd be interesting to know if anybody else in their town knows the history, if there ever was a kind of movement to actually build up the town and to build up housing, because I don't think it's ever happened, right? So anyway, to go back to what I said earlier, Tom, I think if there's something there that maybe this new housing specialist can find out, if there is a sort of menu of items that municipalities can tap into, I think that'd be really great.
That's exactly one of the items that we'll be working on, Pedro, is really trying to come up with a funding menu a menu of funding opportunities for communities. So look forward to that over the next year.
Great.
So Tom, to close out a very informative discussion, a lot of this hits home to my community, the town of Adams, and we went with the 40R program like Lee did. It took us a couple of years to educate the public to go to town meeting to get approval. But as you mentioned before, Tom, that when we had a workshop where we had BRPC individuals come up and explain us the program, and they also attended the planning board meeting and took time to explain to them what 40R was all about. And that educated those of us at town hall, and then we were able to go out and we had several forums, attempting to educate the public to get this 40R. I wish it was named something differently than 40R, to finally get it approved. And it was all education, and just like everybody else, it was all the people had a problem with the low income, even though most of them in the audience probably were low income, complaining about low income people. But anyways, it was a long haul for us, but we finally did get it through, but BRPC did help us. So I think really, Tom, really for us to work on that to help all the communities, whichever way they go, is that really it's education. So I agree. Tom, the executive director's report, getting a little late here. Our executive director's report. Do you have anything you'd like to speak to?
I don't know if I need to cover anything that is already there, but I do want to, something that's omitted that will be coming out, and I think it's germane to this discussion, is over the many years you've heard this phrase, District Local Technical Assistance, or DLTA, and that program will be going, solicitations will be going out very soon for work for calendar year 2022. And I would encourage you to think about if there's some housing related work that you want our specific help in. That would be a very good way to get that. So look forward to those applications. Again, these are grants of service that my staff will be able to work with towns on a number of different issues, housing being one of them, but not only housing. There's other zoning and economic development activities that can be, appropriate for the DLTA program. So I think, that wasn't on the list, but I do want to, highlight that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Tom? Are you good?
Yeah, I think that was it from my standpoint.
Thank you to Representative Paul Mark and to everyone. This was a very good meeting, great discussions, and hopefully we can continue and have actions and make things happen countywide. So great, a very good meeting. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Get that, Kate? Okay, so we're just going to say all in favor. Everybody says yes, we're good to go. All in favor?
Yes.
All right, have a good evening. Thank you.